In this episode, we're going to play with light and shadow to create some fine art out of ordinary objects. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography right here on Adorama TV. I'm Mark Wallace, hanging out in my tiny little kitchen in my Airbnb apartment in Buenos Aires. We're on day 90-something, 92 or 93 of the quarantine here. I still haven't been able to get outside. We're not allowed to do that yet, except for to get food or pharmaceutical stuff. And so I'm being really creative here. Well, one of the things that I love to do is shoot black and white. And so today I want to show you one of my favorite exercises for playing with light and shadow and being able to see that with your camera. And then we're going to do a little technique where we smash the histogram, where we really make things contrasty in post-production. It's a ton of fun, and you can do it anywhere, even in a little kitchen like this. So let's get started. The first thing you need is a camera. Any camera is going to do, an Android, an iPhone, a fancy studio camera, it doesn't really matter. But the thing we want to do with our camera, I'm going to be using my little M10 because that's what I have on hand here, is we want to set up the picture style or the JPEG mode. Some cameras call it a different thing, but what you want to do is you want to put your camera into black and white mode. So on my camera here, I go down to my JPEG settings, and then I go down and I say turn on monochrome. So I'm going to do that. This might be picture styles in your camera. You have to look in your manual to figure out exactly what it's called for your specific brand. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to change my picture style. I don't want my contrast and sharpness to be just normal. I want to crank them way up. So I'm setting my contrast to high, and I'm also setting my sharpness to high. So I have maximum contrast, maximum sharpness. I'm shooting that. I'm also shooting JPEG plus RAW. So my JPEGs will be the in-camera settings that I just created, but I want the RAW files so that I can really do some fun post-production later on. It's totally optional. You can do that or not do that, but we're going to do that in this video so you can see how it works. Okay, well, you probably noticed that the light on me is really nasty here, but I've done that on purpose because I want to show you that you don't need any studio lights or flashes or anything to do this. You can just use the available light. In this kitchen, up on the ceiling here, we have these really small LED lights that are really having this strong downlight that is very contrasty. In fact, right over here we have these coffee mugs. We're going to really be playing with those. If we zoom in, we can see the light in the ceiling. If we zoom into those coffee mugs, you can see there's a big difference between the light and the dark area in this scene right here. So the light and the dark is very contrasty. In other words, there's a big difference between the white and the black. But if we look at this from a different perspective, and instead of seeing it in color, we look at this from black and white, bam, you can really see the difference. That's why we've set our camera into black and white mode, so that we can start seeing that with our eyes. So if you've got a mirrorless camera like this guy right here, you can see it before you shoot through the lens. You're going to see that black and white. If you've got a DSLR, you can take a picture and look on the image feedback, so on the little screen, and you can see that. But we want to start seeing that with our camera, that difference between black and white, the light and the shadow. Now we're going to take a few pictures here, and we're going to look around the kitchen or wherever you are for scenes, little vignettes that have that difference between light and dark. So I'm going to first take a picture of these coffee mugs here. I'm shooting in an ISO of 400. I have my aperture wide open because there's not a lot of light in here, so it is at 1.4. And then my shutter speed is right at about it's about 180th of a second to get a proper exposure. I'm doing that because I'm handheld. If I had a tripod, I could shoot a little bit slower, but I'm just looking to get this scene right here. There's also other things in this kitchen I can shoot. There's some dirty dishes right here, so I'll shoot those. This is not something I would normally shoot, but again, I'm looking for differences between the brightest and darkest area in the scene. I'm just going to do that around this kitchen, and then we're going to hop over into post-production. I'm going to show you how you can compress everything to really get some cool results. All right, well, I'm done taking photos in the kitchen. I took a couple extra bonus pictures here in the living room. Now what we want to do is we want to take the images and take them from ordinary to extraordinary. So let's take a look really quickly. Here are some of the JPEG images that came out of the camera. And, you know, if I look at a few of these here, the coffee mugs, it's okay. Here are the dishes that are in the dish rack. Nothing here is spectacular. And so we need to get from okay to spectacular. How do we do that? Well, what we're going to be doing is applying a technique, calling it, we're going to smash, we're going to compress the tonal values, our shadows and our blacks, we're going to smash those together to create really high contrast portraits. Now, just a note, I'm going to be showing you how to do this in Lightroom, but pay attention to the principles because the techniques I'm going to be showing you can be done in Photoshop, in Lightroom, in Capture One. They can be done on the imaging editing app on your iPhone or Android. They can be done in iPhoto. There's pretty much anywhere that you can edit an image. You can do this. There are controls that let you set the black point and change the exposure and contrast. So you can do this in any editing app that you have. So again, pay attention to the principles, not necessarily the software that I'm using. Okay, let's go in and sort of understand this from the reverse. I'm going to show you how we get from blah to awesome, and then I'll explain all the techniques that are involved. So what I'm going to do here is, remember we shot JPEG and RAW. So when we're doing our post-production, we want to use the raw image because it has more detail, more flexibility in image editing. So I have brought those all into Lightroom. And so what I'm going to do here is I've already selected the images that I'm most interested in. And one of them I shot specifically to illustrate what I mean by compressing all the tonal values. So take a look at this image. This is just of a light in my living room here. And notice we have on this side of this lampshade, we have a dark area, and then it just sort of slowly transitions from a dark gray into a light gray. We've got just hundreds of different values of shades of gray. And so what we want to do to make our images really amazing, instead of having really dark gray and just a shade lighter gray and a shade lighter gray and a shade lighter gray and a shade lighter gray, this smooth transition, we want to get rid of that. Sometimes less is more. So we're going to smash all those grays together. We're going to compress them and make them all black. Let me show you what I mean. So we have here this image. This is of the coffee mugs on the wall. Notice we have all these different grays. So we've got really dark gray here, this bar that's holding up the coffee mug, darker gray over here, which is the shadow, a dark sort of a middle gray here, lighter gray. There's just all these different values of gray. If we take these grays right here and we smash them from gray all the way down into black, we get an image that looks like this. And now we're cooking with gas. This is what we want. We want super high contrast images that really are punchy and stand out. So how do we do that? How do we smash all those tonal values together? It's very, very easy. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and play with these dishes. So this is not a very interesting image at all. There's just some dishes that I washed and it's in the dish rack. Oops, let me get that again. I'm going to go to the Develop module. Now the thing that we want to do here is first we want to make sure that it's a black and white image. So I'm going to click on black and white. And then also I'm going to zoom in up here. Notice on the histogram, this area right here, it says shadows. Right next to it, it says blacks. We want to take these two areas and smash those two areas together. Also notice this triangle right here. There's another triangle right here. What that does, if I hover over it or if I click on it, it will show me in the image where there is absolute black. Right now, there's no absolute black. But if I take the exposure way down, if I do that, anything that's blue, showing up blue here, that is absolute black. So that's what absolute black is. The rest has some detail in it. There's some image information there. So we can use that tool to sort of give us an indication of how good of a job we're doing at compressing these tonal values. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get my blacks slider and just start sliding it down until I start seeing lots of stuff all getting smashed together. I'll click on this triangle to turn that off and see how that is starting to give us some punch. Well, the problem is here, now we've just taken everything and made it black or middle gray. have contrast, we need something to offset that black, which is white. We need a great difference between the brightest and darkest area. So just like we're smashing all the tonal values on one side of our histogram, we also need to do that on the other side where all the whites and highlights are. So then what I'll do is, if I look on the histogram, see up here where we have highlights and whites, well, there are no whites. I can go up here and see that I've got just a little bit of white there and absolute white there. So what I'll do here is I'll take my whites, I'll start sliding those over, and now I'm starting to get this really contrasty image. I can sort of play with my shadows to open that up just a little bit, but now we're starting to get there. All right, the dishes, that's not an image I would choose. It's a good image to sort of illustrate how to do this, but it's not something that I would choose because it doesn't have the light that I like. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into one of these other images here. We're gonna go into these coffee mugs here because I think this has the perfect formula. So again, I'm gonna go in here, make sure that I have converted this to black and white, and then let's start taking all these shadows and compressing them. So again, my blacks, I'm gonna start taking those down. If I wanna sort of peek to see how much of this is black, I think I want all of this here to be absolute black as well. I can take my shadows, start smashing those down just a little bit. I might have to take my exposure down a bit. Again, now I have all these middle grays where they should be white. So I'll take the other side of this. I'll take my whites, start bringing those out. Now I'm getting this really contrasty image. The other thing I can do is use the contrast slider. That's what it's there for. So if I move that to the right, it's gonna start stretching the whites out, stretching the blacks out so that we have high contrast. I can use my clarity slider, and now we have something that looks really interesting. That's all there is to it. Now the thing that you'll find using this technique is that you can take a bunch of different images of just ordinary things. You can shoot silverware, you can shoot coffee mugs, you can shoot coffee pots, you can shoot windows and lampshades and doors, all kinds of things, and then really stretch things out, compress each side of the histogram, and you're gonna get super high contrast fine art images. Then you can even take those one step farther. You could add a frame to that using like a white border or maybe some plug-in in Photoshop to create some really interesting looks. And when you're done, you're gonna get images that look like this. Well, this is a great little exercise to help you begin to see things monochromatically and play with light and shadow. It's really, really fun. Get out there and do it. Thanks again for joining me for this episode of Exploring Photography. Don't forget to subscribe to Adorama TV. Follow me on Instagram for all the behind the scenes goodies, and I will see you again